Okay, g'day everyone. Welcome, lonely hearts, to this Endnote session. I hope you're all having an okay time in the well, whatever it is you're doing, if you're locked at home or whatever. Thank you for tuning in. And I know a lot of you were tuning in for last week's Endnote session, so I'm sorry about the technical difficulties last week, but hopefully this week we'll make it up to you. So this is one of our first, I should introduce myself first, right? So my name's Pat Norman, and I'm one of the academic liaison librarians at the University of Sydney Library. And yeah, hopefully you can see me. Yeah, you can. What I'm probably going to do for this session is disable video. So if you have got your video switched on, just disable that. It'll make the stream work a little bit easier for everybody. And what I'm going to take you through today is an introduction to Endnote. So we'll try a couple of activities on the way through to actually get you practicing and using Endnote while you're in the session. But if that doesn't work out too well, because obviously we're all going to be working at different speeds and we're all going to be in different places. So if it doesn't work out too well, we may discontinue that halfway through, but we'll see how we go with that. At any time during this session, a couple of Zoom things. At any time during this session, if you want to raise your hand, you've got that Zoom option down the bottom of your screen. And if you want to type a question at any stage, feel free to use Zoom chat to type a question. I think if you hit spacebar, you'll be able to unmute yourself. So if you just hold down the spacebar, you can unmute yourself and ask a question out loud if you'd like to do that as well. But I think you might find it a bit easier to ask all the questions in chat. I'll be watching the chat box throughout the whole session. So if there is something that you want to know about, just ask it there and I'll get back to you. So we can probably get the ball rolling now because we've got a fair few people here. This session is going to be recorded, so don't feel too, if you're not following along or something like that, don't feel too stressed because we will have a recording made available to you as well. But this is just designed to give you an introduction to what Endnote is, how it works, and some of the basics that you'll need to understand to get yourself up and running. So to kick off, I just wanted to, how will this session work? So basically, like I said, if you have any questions throughout, just pop it into the chat box or unmute yourself and yell out. But probably the easiest is the chat box, and I can come to it at the end of whatever I'm talking about at that moment. Throughout, we're going to have a look at what is Endnote, so the application. What does it do? How do we create an Endnote library to actually get things started? So a place for us to store the references that you find. How do we add references to an Endnote library? How do we use the cite while you write function in Endnote? How to change referencing styles. So some of you may be using a different referencing style. So whether it's APA or Chicago or whatever the referencing style is. And how do we create groups to organize references? So those are the things that we're going to go through in this session. Throughout the session, when you see a slide like this that says important, these are some of the important tips and tricks that you need to know about Endnote. So if you see the exclamation mark, listen up. Some of this stuff can be really important, whether it's for installing or using the software generally. And the other thing is, if you see a blue slide like this that says your turn, that's when it's going to be over to you to have a bit of a play with Endnote. And the way we'll manage the time with that, I'll inflict more of my musical taste on you for a couple of minutes. So you'll hear a song and you'll have a chance to try things out with Endnote. If you're not able to get something to work during that period of experimenting, I'll just get you to make a note of it off to the side. And then at the end of the session, you can either ask me in the group chat or you can flick me an email and we can talk about it one-on-one as well. So there's plenty of support for you because we're going to do this as an online format. If you are finding that you're tripping up and you've got a personal question about how do you get your Endnote fixed, it's probably easier just to hold off on that and then touch base with me after the session. But if it's a major issue and it's preventing you from continuing, Endnote's not installing, I'll hopefully be able to address most of those issues for you during the session so that everybody's able to see that one. But let's just play it by ear. So any questions? So what is Endnote and what can it do? The first and most obvious thing here is that it can collect and store references, including full text PDFs as you're doing research. So during your time at university, and you may be at any stage in your time at university, but you'll be collecting and reading a whole lot of stuff that you've accessed on the internet, and keeping that all in your brain is really difficult. And also keeping track of PDFs in files and folders can be really difficult. So Endnote is a place for you to store all of that stuff. The second thing it does is adds this cite while you write function, which basically allows you to automatically format citations in your reference list. So a lot of people are sort of like, I mean, one of the things that we always say with these EndNote classes is really important that you know how to reference before you start using a tool like EndNote. But once you do know how to reference, it's a really, really powerful time saver, because you can start writing a document, write a sentence, and it will automatically format citations both in text and in the reference list at the end of your document, which is really helpful. Some of the more advanced functions that EndNote has, which we're not going to talk about in this session, but after you've had a chance to play around with EndNote and get used to it, register for our Working with EndNote session. That's available on the library website as well. The Working with EndNote session will take you through some of the more advanced capabilities of EndNote, but you need to have a little bit more of a working knowledge of the software before you get into that. So those advanced functions include backup and share your EndNote library, and also to, so by backing it up to the cloud, it gives you the ability to collaborate with your colleagues as well. So if you're doing an assignment with somebody else, or if you're a postgraduate research student, you can sort of collaborate with your supervisor, your thesis supervisor, or potentially with a research colleague at another university, or whatever the case may be. And the other thing, and this we'll deal with in the Working with EndNote session as well, the experienced users session, will keep track of research notes and annotations that you make as you read. So there's a way for you to actually mark up documents in EndNote, to make research notes about the things that you're reading in EndNote, and you can store them alongside the actual reference and the PDF itself in the EndNote software. So it becomes a bit of an all-in-one research solution. Like, it manages all of your research, it manages referencing and citing and all that sort of stuff. And it's a place to keep all of that knowledge as you go to do your assignment. So as far as compatibility goes, and you probably already know this, we do encourage people to download and install EndNote before this session starts. But compatibility, it's compatible with both Windows and Mac platforms. If you're using Mac OS Catalina, you need to be upgraded to EndNote X9.3. So if you're thinking of upgrading to Catalina, hop over to the EndNote subject guide on the library website, and I'll show you where you can access that guide later in this workshop. But you'll need to hop over to the EndNote subject guide, go to the Catalina page, and upgrade to X9.3. So that's the latest version of the software. If you've done that, you'll be able to work it fine with Catalina. But otherwise, EndNote's completely compatible with every version of Mac OS and every version of Windows. It works, the two word processing software platforms that it works with is obviously Microsoft Word, and that's the most commonly used one. So it will install an integration into Microsoft Word, which I'll show you later. Because the university gives everyone, students and staff at the university, a subscription to Microsoft Office 365, strongly recommend you use Microsoft Word for most of the things that you produce. If you use Pages, because you're using a Mac, you just need to download a plugin that's also available in the EndNote subject guide. Using other word processing software, EndNote's not compatible with those other pieces of software. So the big major ones, Microsoft Word and Pages, you're able to do that as well. We've just had a question come through, found that Word and EndNote are not compatible, or not that compatible. We'll get through this session. You'll probably find that there might be an issue that you're having with your particular EndNote software, because the one piece of software that EndNote is designed to work with is Word. So sometimes there might be an issue. If you are experiencing problems with EndNote and Word, the fastest way to fix those problems is to upgrade Word to the latest version and upgrade EndNote to the latest version, in case there's a bug happening in the background. But if there's not a bug, sometimes there are issues with installation. It depends on the platform. And we're here to help you troubleshoot those sorts of problems as well in the library. So the first thing about installing EndNote, if you've got all the Microsoft apps, you'll need to have all your Microsoft apps closed during installation. Sorry, I'm moving the chat box around because I can't really see the whole screen at the same time. You'll need to have all Microsoft apps like Word closed during installation. If you're using a Mac and you're trying to install EndNote, you might find that Mac security prevents you from running the installer. This is really easy to fix. You just need to right-click. And what this does is tells the Mac that this person really wants to open this piece of software, and it'll bring up a prompt saying, are you sure you want to open, or do you want to cancel? So if you're installing EndNote on a Mac, right-click or just hold the control button on your keyboard and click the installer file, and then select open. So for the purposes of this workshop, I'm going to assume that everybody's already got EndNote installed. So sorry to those of you who haven't got it installed. You'll probably have to follow along, or when I give you a chance to practice, you'll have the you'll take the time to quickly download the piece of software there. But to install it, it's really simple. Go to the library website. I might show you what this one looks like, just so that you can actually, for those of you who want to follow along at home who haven't already downloaded it, you might be able to take this quick opportunity to download it. But basically, if I go to, I'll just flick a web browser to you. So if I go to the library website, and then under study, there's an EndNote tab here. So I'll click into that. And this is what the EndNote subject guide looks like. So you can see it's broken up to setup for Mac, setup for PC. You've got your downloader over on the side here. And then these are sort of guides to doing all the basic functions of EndNote. So hitting collecting references, if you're actually adding references to your EndNote library, writing and citing, when you actually come to writing an essay or a chapter or whatever it is you're writing. Backup and sync for when you're looking to actually save your EndNote library into the cloud, so it's backed up somewhere. And like 90% of the problems that we have can be corrected if you have a look in this troubleshoot and FAQ section. So we have tons of queries that come through, and most of them are resolved on this page here. And obviously registering for our other EndNote workshops, you can do that at this link here. You're already in our first one, but if you wanted to register for the Working with EndNote workshop that takes you into some of the more advanced features in here, that's where you can do that. So if you haven't already downloaded EndNote, just click into that link there. It'll take you to ICT's knowledge base. If you find that it's not letting you, so you've got EndNote X9 for PC and X9 for Mac. So just download that and install it. If you're off campus, which many of us are, you'll need to have the university's VPN installed. So you can also get that from ICT. If you keep getting an error saying can't access, it says access blocked or something like that, the easiest thing for you to do is just clear your browser cookies and history, close your browser and relaunch it, and you should have access to EndNote that way. You'll also see on the side here, when you click that link, it gives you access to the university's VPN as well. So that makes that really straightforward to access. So we'll just jump back over to our slides now. So for now, I'm just going to hope that people have got it installed. If you're looking to install it for Mac or PC, you want to use X9. X9 is the latest version of EndNote. So if you are looking at it now and looking to download it now, just download EndNote X9 for Mac and then run the installer file. Just remembering, if you're using a Mac, you will find that it may pop up a security thing. So Mac security is super vigorous. It can't get viruses, unlike obviously a whole lot of people. So what you want to do then is right click it and hit open, and then you'll be able to run the software. So what I'm going to demonstrate for you now is how to create an EndNote library. And what you'll find most of the time is that EndNote will have automatically done this for you when you first open the software. But let me just share my whole screen to you. Now I use a Mac, but the principle is going to look basically the same for EndNote wherever you go. So when you first open the EndNote software like this, what you'll see around the edge of my screen is EndNote X9, but there's no library, there's nothing, it just looks like it's a half-open application. If you're using a PC, it'll open to a big grey window with no functions or features in it. So the thing you need to do is go up to File up the top here, and then hit New. And what you're going to create here is a new EndNote library. So I might save this to my desktop. And you can name that library whatever you want. So by default, most people just call it My EndNote Library. So I'll just call this one Pat's EndNote Library, because I don't know if I've got another library called My EndNote Library. I save that. And now I have an EndNote library. We don't want to go full screen like that. Let's make that a little smaller. So now I've got my EndNote library, and what you'll see along the left-hand side of the screen there are groups. In the center here is going to be any references that I add to this library. And what we're going to do is gradually populate this library with references during this session, so you can see what that looks like. Just jump here. So one of the important things to remember, so that's how to create a library. One of the really important things to remember when you're creating an EndNote library, your EndNote library should be stored on a local drive. So on the C drive of your computer if you're using a PC, or on your local drive if you're using a Mac. Don't store it on cloud services like Dropbox or OneDrive or Google, like Google Drive. These cloud services update really frequently to the cloud, and because EndNote, the software stack that Endnote is built on is quite old. It's not used to those kinds of cloud services. So over time, it can jam up and corrupt your Endnote library. So the working with Endnote session will give you an introduction to synchronization so that you can back up your Endnote library online. For now, just store your Endnote library on a local drive or on a USB if you want to have it stored somewhere that you can unplug from your computer. So what I get you to do is create an Endnote library. So open Endnote, select the file menu, select new, and then name the library and save it onto your local drive. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that because it's a pretty straightforward thing. If your desktop is automatically backed up to the cloud, that's not a problem if it's iCloud. So what we find with, because most people whose desktops are backed up to the cloud, it's going to be iCloud, and I'm guessing that's the situation here. iCloud doesn't seem to create the same problem with EndNote libraries. To be safe, you can still save it to the My Documents folder. But yeah, basically desktop or My Documents with an Apple device should be totally fine. G, you just put a hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself and let us know where on your screen hands up option is? It's usually in the bottom row of Zoom.
Yeah, hi. So if you click on participants down the bottom, there's like a little two-person symbol with participants under it.
Yeah.
Click on that and it will open up like a little window on the screen that gives you like a bunch of options: raise hand, yes, no, go slower, go faster. So yeah, just click raise hand and then you can close the window again.
So many hands raising now. Oh my God, this is amazing. So this is really cool. This is going to just change our lives on this Zoom session, which is awesome. Thank you very much, Emma, for that. So what I'll do now, the next thing we want to have a talk about is adding references to your library. So you've created an EndNote library now. Adding references to your library is the next thing. Any item at all that you find online can be added as a reference in your EndNote library if you manually add the bibliographic information. But for most references, so for most of the stuff that you'll be doing research on online, like academic papers and academic resources that you find in the library's databases, the fastest way to add them is to export them from the database as an RIS file. So when you're looking through any kind of academic database online, this RIS file, that should be your hint, aha, that's going to go into EndNote. But what I'm going to do is first show you how you can manually add something, because what you might find sometimes is that you're adding a website or you're adding a report, maybe a report that's come from government or like a big consultancy like Deloitte. So anytime you're adding a document that isn't captured by our library databases, this is when you want to add it manually. So to do that, let's take an example document here. Oh, how cool. And I'm just going to go to my EndNote library here. And you'll see a button here that says, when you hover over it, it'll have add new document, but you can also go up to the references menu. And this is on both PC and Mac, I have to stress. Hit new reference, and you'll end up with this little window here. And the first thing to keep in mind in this window, you need to tell EndNote what type of reference this is. So tapping that down arrow there will give you a whole bunch of different options. So let's say if you're adding a book or a book section or whatever it is, like a book section is their code for book chapter. But if I'm adding a journal article, I'll type in my name here. And you can do it in two formats. So you can go Norman Pat, or you can go Pat Norman. So take your pick either way. EndNote understands, but that comma is really, really important for you to add. I'm going to go Pat Norman and then add the year of publication. Journal. Let's make this a really long article, so it'll be really difficult to read. So after you filled out all the bibliographic information that you can in the reference, and this is why we say it's really, really helpful to remember, that it's really, really helpful to you for you to know about referencing before you actually start doing using EndNote, because you need to know how much information you have to include. But you can never include too much information, because EndNote will actually take its time when it's referencing, when it's citing for you, and remove anything that doesn't need to be there. So just one thing to keep in mind, when you're putting in the author name there, you can either put the name like that, first and last name, so Pat Norman, Or if you're putting the surname first, put a comma. Generally, if I'm manually adding something, I just put their name as you would normally write a person's name. So just Pat Norman. And if I save that into the library, it understands. And you can see down the bottom here, it starts to generate a preview of what that reference looks like, cited using that referencing style. So I've got APA 6 there. If I wanted to change that to Chicago, it would change that citation style for me as well. Now, one thing I also want to show you here is if you're citing a particular organization, so a government department, for example, you would actually say, because if you were just to type in like Commonwealth of Australia like this, Endnote would understand the word Australia to be the surname of this person. So you remember before when I put Pat Norman, basically Endnote looks at this and it goes, aha, there's no comma in here, so that's the first name, that's the surname. If Endnote were to see this, it will see Australia as the surname. So what I need to do is put a comma at the end of the whole thing, and Endnote understands that to be a full name. And one of the other things I've showed you there is that when you're adding two authors to a document, you add each author on a new line by hitting enter. So if you're manually adding something to Endnote, each author goes on a new line. So this is saying the authors of this document is the Commonwealth of Australia and Pat Norman. Then we'll go year. And we'll pretend that's a really simple article. So now we've got two citations that I've manually added to my Endnote library. So that's pretty straightforward. Are there any questions about that before we move along, shuffle along? So I kind of mentioned, how did I select referencing style? So if you have a look down here in Endnote, and we're going to have a bit more of a talk about referencing styles, but if you want a preview of referencing style, you'll see just above the section, just above the preview citation there, you've got a choice of referencing styles. And we'll go into that more in a minute. Next question is, what about if there are a lot of authors and you want to use et al? The great thing about Endnote is you don't have to do that because Endnote will automatically take care of that for you. So Endnote knows what the different referencing styles call for. For example, if there's 5 or more authors, you're supposed to use et al, depending on the style. Endnote will automatically do that for you. If you're dealing with a scientific paper that's got, you know, like 20 authors on it or something like that, you're probably not going to be putting it in there manually. You'll be exporting it from a database. And that's the next thing that I'm going to show you as well. So just bear in mind, you will never need to type et al if you're using Endnote. It takes care of all of that for you. Now, just to reiterate, well, authors, if your reference has a company or a government department for an author, that's when you enter the name in full with a comma at the end. University of Sydney, for example, with a comma at the end, and that'll tell you, that tells Endnote that that's a full name. Next question, which type of reference is acceptable for PhD thesis in mathematics? We might take that one offline because it doesn't directly relate to Endnote. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But I'd probably say with all referencing styles, check in with your PhD supervisor. And I think particularly with mathematics, they might have a quirky referencing style. Check in with your thesis supervisor if you're ever unsure which referencing style to use, because it does vary from discipline to discipline. Okay, so manually adding a reference, I'll give you a moment now, just manually add a reference into your Endnote library. Just add your own name if you like and just make the reference up. So let's skip on to our next thing. So importing a reference. So this is the way that you're mostly going to be adding references to your Endnote library. And I mentioned before looking for RIS files. And that's what I'm going to show you now. So basically when you're looking in one of the library's databases, I'll demonstrate library search because library search is more complicated than normal databases. So I'll show you what it looks like in library search, and then I'll show you what it looks like in a normal database. So if I were to search in library search for, let's try coronavirus. Why not? It's timely. So I'm going to search for this particular subject in the library database and see what kind of information is out there. We might learn something today. So, and I might filter for peer-reviewed journals. Okay, so let's have a look just at Oh, here we go. Nice and timely. The epidemiology of the 2019 novel coronavirus. So if I click into this item here, and this is in the libraries database, you'll notice here we've got this item Endnote RIS. So what that allows you to do is to download this article. So if you've found an article that you think is actually really interesting and really relevant, you can click Endnote RIS. Now in the library database only, like in library search only, it's going to ask you to choose an encoding. This is the only time you'll have to do this. Most other databases don't have this sort of thing. So just choose whichever one. The first one is the easiest and hit download. And what that's going to do is download an RIS file into your downloads folder, whether that's on a Mac or a PC, depending whatever browser you use. So if I now open that Endnote RIS, it will import that article into my Endnote library. And you can see here, it's got all of those authors listed, and all that detail is automatically imported and formatted for me down the bottom here. And if I change that to APA 6, I can see that it changes that formatting for me. So whenever you're doing research in a library database, all you need to do is look for this Endnote RIS thing. So let's have a look at what that looks like if you're using an actual library database rather than a library search. So if I jump into databases here, and I might go through to Scopus. Now, the thing to bear in mind is that not every database is going to say Endnote RIS export. It might have the word export. It might say save. It might say download, friends. Some pretty crazy things that it says. You just have to have a look around, and generally anything that says like save or download or export, there'll be an option for Endnote there. And it's that RIS file, like I said, that you're looking for. Wow, Scopus is taking ages. There we go. So if I just search in here for and now if I want to export multiple results from the Scopus database, there might be similar things. So I just tick these boxes because I think they're really relevant. And then I see that RIS export up the top there. So if I tap that, because the file I'm looking for is RIS, I include as much information as I can and see how we've got RIS format for EndNote and Reference Manager. So I export that file and that downloads to my downloads folder. And when I open that, it will add those 3 references to my EndNote library as well. So that's really straightforward. Using whichever database, you can just find that RIS file, export that. If you want to select multiple in some databases, you can do that and export multiple references, and then download those into your EndNote library. Now, 2 things that are important to be aware of with both Mac and PCs. When you're first installing it, it might be that they don't, the file association hasn't been set up between EndNote and an RIS file. So if you do find that you try to open the RIS file and you get an error saying, which application do we open with this? It's just a matter of telling your computer, open RIS files with EndNote. So if it's a Mac, you want to right click it and go to get info and say associate files or like open with. And on a PC, there'll usually be an open with window that comes up with it. So your turn now. Open your favorite database if you have one. Identify the location of an RIS download and download the file and open it with EndNote. Questions just come through. Do I have to check the information after it's saved? You don't have to if you download. So, I mean, like I should be really honest with you, Google Scholar also has the ability to export citations as RIS files. If you're downloading RIS files from Google Scholar, definitely check to make sure the information is accurate, because quite often Google Scholar will capitalize every letter in the title of the article. But if you're downloading from one of our library databases like Scopus or Web of Science or Taylor and Francis or one of those, most of the time you can be very confident that the citation is correct, like the information is correct, because it's a job of those databases to maintain that sort of clean data. So just take a moment and have a crack at that. Raise your hand when you've had a chance to do that. Okay. So about half the classes managed to get through that. What we might do, so if you're still working on that, just keep trying, download the RIS file and add that. If people are using a Mac or a PC, just to bear in mind that sometimes you need to tell the computer which application to open EndNote files with, so the RIS files. So if you do encounter that, just right click the file and say for a for a PC, say open with, and for a Mac, you go to get info and then scroll down to open with and tell your Mac to open it with EndNote. If you do encounter that issue, or you're continuing to encounter that issue after this workshop, just let me know, and I can send you, we've got a really handy one-page guide to it as well, for how you can actually change that file association. So a couple of things to be aware of as you're adding materials to your EndNote library. If you put garbage into the library, or if garbage gets imported to the library, garbage will be exported into your reference list. So EndNote doesn't have the ability to detect whether the details of a reference are correct. For example, you know, too many letters capitalized, is the name misspelled, or anything like that. So it's really important to always do a quick check that all the information that you expect to be there is in there when you add something to your EndNote library. But like I said before, if you're getting it out of Scopus or one of our major academic databases, there's no need to worry about it most of the time. If you're getting it from Google Scholar, I would definitely check to make sure it's accurate. And the same probably goes for library search as well. Just because of that extra step of exporting, it doesn't hurt to check that the data's good. So now that you've got something in your EndNote library, this is where it gets really exciting. We can make life a little bit easier for you when you actually come to writing your actual papers. So I'm just going to exit full screen mode of that. So if I click into Microsoft Word, I'm just going to show you this in a blank document, and then you'll have a chance to look at it as well, or practice with it as well. And if you've already got a just a dummy reference in your EndNote library, you'll be able to use that. So what you notice in my, oh no, this is not good. I've accidentally installed Zotero today. Bear with me. I'm just going to close that. This is the curse of being a librarian, that you end up working with 1,000 different pieces of software. And I want to change this. Okay. So one of the questions that's just come in, I'm getting the same error message. However, when I went into default app settings, the RS file is not there, so I cannot manually ascribe an opening app to it. So I'm pretty sure with a PC, if you right click, hang on a second, if you right click and then hit open with, it should allow you to do that. Or if you just try to open it by default, it says, tell us which application to open with rather than text edit. I'll just send through this link for the PC thing, how to change file associations. If we do run into trouble, so that link should hopefully give you a guide to setting that up. If you do keep running into trouble, Amy, no worries, just email me afterwards and we can sort that out. Or I can hang around for a little bit after this session and we can do a screen share as well to see if we can fix that. So what I'm going to do is jump back over to Word, and I'm hoping that, oh, great. Okay, so there's a Terra thing that is annoyingly there. But what you'll find in your Word now is you've got this EndNote X9 menu. So if you, on your computers, open up Word and go just to create a blank document, you see EndNote X9 menu here. Now, if I type a sentence, and then I click Insert Citation, this will bring up a searching window. So I can actually search for any of my citations that I downloaded before. So I'm going to search for Norman because I know that I had a reference in my library under the name Norman. And you'll probably find this will load a lot faster on your computers. For some reason mine is super slow, probably because I have a billion EndNote libraries. Or maybe because I've got Zotero installed as well. So here is that Norman article that I found before. So if I click Insert, that'll insert that citation into my Word document, and it'll properly format it for me. I know it's gone blank. This is my computer. I apologize for that. This is like another peril of working from home. It's just thinking. You'll probably find if you've tried this on your computer, it'll work way faster. So there you go. You see this test sentence, it's created that in-text citation there. Now, if I want to create a new page for my reference list, I'm just going to go to Insert and add a page break. And then I'll just add the title references to that reference list. Now, if I want to add another citation, and then I go back to my EndNote menu, and then hit Insert Citation, and now I'm going to search for coronavirus. And these are all the articles that I imported before. So I'm interested in something about this year's outbreak, so I hit Insert. That'll add that citation in there, and it's updated my reference list for me as well. The important thing to remember, so this EndNote will manage your citations for you. And if I were to add a third sentence and include that citation again, but then I want to include two authors in the same, two authors or three authors in the same set of brackets, I'm just going to hit Insert there. And that automatically formats for me. And you remember earlier we had a question about EndNote automatically adding et al. You can see that EndNote's done that just there for me as well. Now when I scroll down to my reference list, it's adding that in the correct order for me and keeps track of it for me. Now let's say I want to remove a citation from my reference list. I'm going to right click that and then go down to Edit Citation and click More. And let's say I didn't want this Kizia citation, it's too old, it's from 2003. I just click Remove Citation and hit OK. It automatically updates that for me. And if I scroll down to the reference list, it removes it from the reference list for me. So this is where EndNote becomes really powerful if you're using Cite while you're writing an essay or a chapter or a journal article, whatever it is that you're writing. Because as you write, you can do your citations. And you keep your reference. But it is important to keep track of, when you are making a change, don't delete things out of the reference list here, delete it in text. So right click it and hit Edit Citation and remove the citation if you need to. And that means that EndNote up here is keeping track of the things that it needs to add into the reference list at the end as well. So that seems pretty straightforward, right? Couple of things that you need to bear in mind. If you're using a footnoted style like Chicago, you first need to add the footnote and then use Cite while you write to insert a reference. But if you're using another style like APA or anything like that, don't need to worry about it at all. So it's over to you now. Add a citation. So create a new Word document, type out a little test sentence. You don't have to have imported things from one of our databases to do this, as long as you've got a reference in your EndNote library. So even the dummy one that we created earlier with your own name. Type out a sentence, then go to the EndNote menu and select Insert Citation and search for a citation and add it. Pretty strange sounding issue, so we might have a look at a couple of things that could be in EndNote. So if I just go to Microsoft Word, so you've described, Nicole said that when she inserts a citation, it adds the reference, but not the in-text citation. So when we're doing Insert Citation up here, a couple of things that you should check for. Check which referencing style that you've got selected in Word, because this is how you can update the referencing style in your document. So if I change this, for example, to let's say a numbered citation style, it'll upload the whole document. It'll update the whole document to look like this, which is a numbered style, so it appears in my reference list with numbers. So the thing to check for now, check for the referencing style that you're most likely to use. I'd probably say APA 6 is a really safe style to experiment with EndNote with. And then when you hit Insert Citation, make sure that we're checking what we're inserting down here. So if you put Insert in Bibliography only, it's only going to add that reference list citation. Whereas you hit Insert or just the Insert button, it should insert an in-text citation like so. If you continue to have the problem, this might be one that we have to take offline. But ordinarily in a classroom, I'd bounce over and go, here's how we fix the problem for you. But these are the new times. Like, how do we do this via Zoom? So hopefully that will correct that problem. Yes, Mayumi, EndNote does enable you to put references in different languages, not English. I would probably encourage you to reach out if you're using a language that has, so for example, characters in another language, so Korean or Japanese or Chinese. So actually reach out to us for advice on using characters from a different language. But otherwise it does have that capability. Will Word automatically update your references if you make a change to the record in Endnote? Okay, amazing question from Emma Petherbridge, a really good student at the university. So if you are going to make changes to your reference, so let's say you realize that you misspelled Pat Norman in this citation here, the place you make that change is over in the Endnote application. So I might go over to all references and say, oh, Pat didn't actually write this article about introduction to Endnote. So I'm going to open that one back up and I'm going to change that name to, let's go with Emma Petherbridge. So in there, and then jump back over to my Word application here. So you can see that I've got Norman P, but I realized he wasn't actually the author of that article. So I've made that change. Then I hit Update Citations and Bibliography. And what Endnote will then do is look across to my Endnote application and see, oh, they've made that change and correct it for you. So anytime you need to make any changes to the spelling of names or anything like that, you can modify that in Endnote itself, not in the Word document. So I think everyone's had a chance to have a play with that. But if you haven't, you can definitely do that while I'm talking through the next couple of things. So when Endnote first adds something to a Word document, you need to bear in mind that it's going to put the reference list at the bottom of the document, but for most referencing styles, you should have the reference list on a new page. So it's a really good idea to add a page break at the bottom of your document. So you just go to Insert menu in Word and then add a page break. And that'll drop your reference list to a new page. If you do want to add just a reference list to a document, so some people want to add just a reference list to a document, this is even easier than all of that. So I'm going to create a new document for this one, just so you can see what it looks like from scratch. So new document. All you have to do is go to Endnote, select the files, the references that you want to be in your reference list, and then and you do need to make sure that you've got the correct referencing style selected in Endnote. So you go to the edit menu and look for this output styles option and select whichever output style you want. And then you just hit copy formatted. And what that will do is copy a fully formatted reference list, which you can then paste into the bottom of a document. So that's if you only need the reference list. But what I would recommend is that you use the cite while you write function while you're actually going through writing your document. That way you don't need to worry about did you include the right thing? Have you missed anything or anything like that? Now, changing the referencing style, I showed you that a moment ago, so I'll just reiterate for you. If you add references using cite while you write, Endnote gives the ability to completely change the referencing style across the whole document. I've encountered a couple of researchers who have had this problem where they're not using a piece of software like Endnote. They go through creating a whole journal article and then they discover that the journal uses a different style. So then they have to manually go through and change every reference. Using Endnote gives you the ability to completely change the referencing style. And most styles will come pre-installed, but if you're a law student, you'll need to install the Australian Legal Referencing Style, AGLC. You need to install that separately. And we've got a guide to doing that on the Endnote subject guide. So I encourage you to go over there and have a look at that. And obviously reach out if you need help changing the referencing style. Changing the styles, so you may have already experimented with this. I won't put aside a ton of time for this one because it doesn't come up too much because most of the time you'll know which referencing style you're using. But it's so easy to change. You just go to the Endnote menu in Word, the same place you go to insert a citation, select the style dropdown, and then just choose the new referencing style, and it will automatically update your whole document into that new referencing style. And this is just a bit of a note about if you are saving, particularly if you're saving AGLC, new styles, filters, and connection files. So this is something that we'll talk about in the more experienced users workshop. They get saved in a special folder in your documents folder on a PC or Mac. So if you are installing the AGLC style and you have a problem with it, I think it's probably easier to email me as well if you want help with that. Just go to preferences in Endnote and you'll need to tell it where those folders are located. So this is just, if you're looking at the recording or you're looking at these slides in the future because you get stuck with this, this is a reference for you. But I think for the vast majority of you, you won't encounter this problem at all. So don't worry about that too much. Now, attaching a PDF is really straightforward as well. I did mention before that you can store PDFs with your Endnote library. to do that, let's say I'm interested in this article here. So I want to get full text access to that PDF. I'm going to click find full text. Shouldn't have demoed this from Scopus because it takes so much longer to get to full text. Okay. So this is available online. I'm going to go the New England Journal of Medicine. See what I mean? Like a 1,000 logins. So when you found, if you've got a PDF for your, that you want to add to, download the PDF file. If the download works, if the internet works, that's also really helpful. Ah, amazing, great. Let's make this a bit quicker. We'll just search for something else. Do I even have a PDF already downloaded that I could just attach? Yeah, let's just attach a completely different PDF. So let's pretend that I've already downloaded a PDF for Emma's article here, Introduction to Endnote. This is so easy on a Mac or a PC. All you need to do is find the file and then just drag the PDF, click and drag the PDF onto the Endnote item. Click out of it to save, and you'll see this little paper clip here that says that the PDF is attached to that reference. And from then on, you can actually scroll down and the PDF will be attached to it. So you can open that anytime you want from your Endnote library. You can annotate it if you want as well. So attaching PDFs is super, super easy. There are a number of other ways to attach full text PDFs, which I'm not going to go through. I'm not going to show you what they look like today because some of them are less reliable and the easiest way is just to download the PDF as you go. The first is a function called Find Full Text. So if you right click a reference in your Endnote library, you can get Endnote to search across our databases for the full text article and it will attach it if you've already got a reference in your Endnote library. That probably works maybe 60% of the time because sometimes the metadata for those articles hasn't been attached already. Import a PDF. So if you've already got PDFs, this is really helpful. You can go to the import menu, so file and import in Endnote, and it will scan the PDF to see if there's metadata and create a reference out of the PDF. But again, that doesn't work all the time, only for fairly recent PDFs, and it depends on the publisher of the article itself. An import folder works much the same way as importing a PDF. So you can tell Endnote to import a whole folder of PDFs if you've got them on your computer. But again, it's got to check that the metadata is attached to the PDF in order for it to populate that reference properly. And attaching a PDF, which is what I just showed you. And that's just clicking and dragging a full text PDF onto a reference in your Endnote library. And this is by far and away the most reliable way of attaching PDFs to your Endnote library. If you come to the Working with Endnote More Experienced Users workshop, we'll have a look at Find Full Text and importing a folder, because then you might have already accumulated a whole lot of stuff that you want to add to your Endnote library. But for now, if you've got an empty Endnote library, the easiest way to do it is to click and drag full text PDF onto those references. And generally, I find if I've been doing research in a database and I think that something's worth adding to my Endnote library, I'll download the PDF during that research process anyway. So that's attaching a PDF. I won't get you to play with that one now because it's a fairly straightforward click and drag. The last thing I wanted to mention though is if you're working with multiple projects. So the easiest thing to do here is to create Endnote groups rather than creating multiple Endnote libraries. Group sets, you'll see in Endnote, so there's a group function. Group sets are like top level groups, so they can be a collection of multiple smaller groups. So you might name a group set after a particular subject that you're doing or a particular project that you're working on. And then the groups within that group set would be particular papers or essays or particular works that you're interested in doing for that. So to quickly demonstrate what that looks like in Endnote here, on the left-hand side, this is where your groups will normally appear. So if I go up to the groups menu at the top of the screen, I can create a group set, which is a top level group. And I might name that Introduction to Endnote. And then within that group, I can click Create Group, and I'll create a subgroup. And I might name this Articles by Pat, but actually Emma. And so I can see this article here. I'm going to click and drag that onto that group. And that's one way for me to start building up a storage or like a different group structure for all the different projects that I'm working on. So that's a way of me organizing all of this research that I've been doing. So let's drag another one onto that. And there you go. It gradually populates that group for me. So that's pretty straightforward, and that's one way of keeping all of your groups in order. Now, a couple of things to bear in mind when you're closing the Endnote application. When you're closing it, make sure you're closing the whole program and not the Endnote library. So on a PC, you want to be closing the big X to absolutely close the application. And on a Mac, you want to be hitting Command Q or going up to the Apple menu and quitting the application completely. If you click the smaller X, you'll end up closing your Endnote library and not the whole program. And that means the next time you try to open something in, open up Endnote or try to open an RAS file, Endnote will seem a little bit confused because it'll say you haven't got a library open. So the easiest thing to do is to close your entire Endnote library, and that guarantees that you've got all the information that you need next time you open Endnote up. And then one of the other questions that we seem to get really regularly is, should you update your software? And the short answer is, yeah, absolutely yes. Endnote fixes bugs with all of its software updates. So if there are bugs, do the software update. Most of the time, the compatibility issues that people read about online relate to out-of-date software releases. If there's a really major software release, like a new Mac OS version, check in the Endnote subject guide because it will actually tell you whether or not it's safe to update. For example, that issue with Catalina. So it's always a good idea to check with us before doing a major update. But most of the time, keep your Endnote software up to date. It'll prompt you when you first open it. So the things that we've covered today, because I think we're at the time, yeah, wow. How to download, install, and create an Endnote library. How to add a reference manually or to import a new one from a database. How to use Cite while you write and to change the Endnote citing style. How to attach a PDF if you need to attach a PDF. So clicking and dragging is the easiest way. And the last is creating groups and creating group sets. If you do get stuck at any point, go to sydney.edu.au/library. Under our subject guides link and also under the study tab, there's the Endnote subject guide that has all the information you could want about Endnote. And if you do get stuck, you can always get in touch with your academic liaison librarian with questions or flick an email through to me. We'll be posting a recording of this guide to the library subject guide as well. So this workshop, we'll post that so that you can actually check back if you need to, and the slides will be made available there as well. If you do have any questions, I'll be here for the next like 5 minutes in the chat box, so feel free to type them in there. Otherwise, if you want a one-on-one consult, just flick me an email. That might also be really good. And the last thing is, this is the first time that we've been running this session on Zoom, obviously, given all the difficulty at the moment. So if while I'm waiting for questions, you're able to give some feedback, just scan the QR code or enter the URL underneath it and give your feedback on this session. That'll be really helpful. You'll probably get an email prompting you to do that as well. One of the questions that we've just received, I think I have an old version of Endnote in Word. If I download the new version of Endnote, will it update in Word automatically? Yes, absolutely. So when you download the new version of Word, just hit, when you download the new version of Endnote, just install the software and it will update for both Word and Endnote on your system. And it will actually keep your old Endnote library preserved. So that's really useful. I'm really excited to see that Amy enjoyed the session and fixed the Riz issue. That's really cool. Amazing. All right. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Perry, for tuning in. I hope everyone's enjoying their working from home stuff. Stay tuned. The library will run more not here, but to our social media channels and to our library website. We'll be running more workshops online for a whole range of things, just to make you feel like the home experience is really cool. So, all right. Take care, everyone.